I'm just, as mentioned, I'm just going to go through a few highlights and favorite components. What is Dandi Does It? We always struggle to explain or to even answer that question. It's like, hey, what do you guys do? What's your, and then we'll say like, oh, do you guys know Twitch? And they're like, oh yeah, where people play games. And we're like, yeah, that's where we stream. But like what we do is a lot more multifaceted, and for better or worse, um, we happen to be in a sort of a middle of a bit of a restructuring where we're trying to really trim some of the unnecessary things that are happening on the channel and just hone in on a few core skill sets, but we're still using TouchDesigner daily. We've been going since 2019. In 2019, we were on OBS exclusively, and we were really struggling because with OBS, if you want to composite, if you want to animate, if you want to do anything that has a logic to it, it's tough. You have to use plugins and really twist its arm. So at the turn of 2020 or 2021, an amazing person, Chris, who goes by Patchy Projects, introduced us to TouchDesigner, and he was like, yo, I know you guys are okay with OBS, but just check it out. And he gave me a 1-hour intro to TouchDesigner, and I was sold. We're live between 1 to 4 times a week, 1 to 3 hours at a time. And currently, thanks to TouchDesigner, it's an XR presentation, whereas originally it was more AR with OBS. We switched to a full green screen as part of switching to Touch. And so Dandi and I direct it together, and I do all the Touch dev. So I prepared a few clips here. So they're not in any particular order.
There ever is.
They're really just sort of meant to, give to someone uninitiated an overview of how it looks, what the kind of final presentation looks and feels like. And as it's happening, I'll try and highlight a few things. Are you able to see my cursor?
What's on our list?
Okay, great. So this is one of the scenes we've built. Dandi is in a full green room. She's being tracked sort of in XYZ space. So you can see that the shadow follows her. We can also move the camera around freely. There is a, I'll skip ahead a little bit. This is, yeah. So you can see there's a little robot that's floating next to her. That robot's name's Fixer, and I control Fixer with an Xbox controller. Dandi just used a red object as a cursor to activate that icon, and so she has this like to-do list that we use to present. The city behind there is fully 3D, and the space is.
That's exciting. So the other things are still,
It's like if I turned around, it would look really messy, but since we're always facing the camera this way, it looks pretty tight.
New stuff. That's exciting.
I'll skip to another video. Oh, there, she activated another icon there. So there's an in-world video player. This is either display capture or web render. And then she plays a clip from one of her shows.
Someone's coming in here.
We got a big raid, and then so I think, yeah, she calls me laughing.
That's an instant fail.
You can mission me now.
The other way.
This way.
Okay, so another interesting tidbit, and I was just going through old videos and just trying to capture a few, ideas that I thought were nifty.
Yeah,
this one is, we call this one the body joystick. She's able to move, and the camera will follow her. There she catches or tries to catch a supplement that the viewers can throw into her virtual world.
Well, if you require privacy,
there she catches that one.
Got it. Very
good.
Thank you, Cyrus.
And then I'm flying the camera around using the controller.
Wow.
I'll skip ahead a little bit.
I go in here.
This is an auto poll where users can use chat commands to send votes, single word votes into a tally.
Okay, so engineering.
And another interesting tidbit here, people can join as these avatars of themselves. So using a command, they can choose which species they are and their color and stuff like that.
the Dandy's
And then
original
you can see
memories.
they're sort of animated at a very low
barn
frame rate.
is
I'm
exactly
using
like the barn that was
instancing,
in my dreams, and those apples I didn't get to
I'm
taste
using
were very thick.
Y translation to emulate
They look very
the
familiar.
animation.
Dandy's farm. Is that where Metamilk comes from?
Because
Wouldn't
I
you
don't know
like
of an
to
easy
know,
way to
Tschepe?
do animation
Wouldn't
inside
you
of
like to know?
VOs. Let's see
That's
what
great.
else.
Taking care of yourself.
You can see the blinds closed there. So that was another feature that users can do. And they can do that using
I'm super thirsty at this
so-called
very
chat,
moment.
chat
Casper has this
channel points.
Mary Metamus.
So this here is a
What a wonderful
Twitch
time to
chat
bring in
window. And so
your
when you click
crew,
on it, you can open
because
up
we're back here
a
in
menu of various things that cost loyalty points. So as you
would someone
watch a
please
Twitch
open the
channel, you
blinds so that
accumulate loyalty points. And
Casper and
one of the few
some
channels
of
that
the
use those very
later
robustly,
Zircan, some of the testers
and
that have
also
just-
dynamically
Thank
change which
you.
points are offered depending on what
Coolio
scene
with
we're in.
the 50,000 channel points. Wait, sorry, it's back.
This is another example where users can join. So each time someone types an
World,
exclamation join and then
everyone.
3 numbers, they get a blob that represents them with their name over it, and the color is
Perfect.
based on the numbers that they send in. So this is our weekend exercise show called the Mind Spa, and
At Kako,
again we use a
Colorado. Get in here,
drone
get
camera,
in the
and we
iceberg.
use that sort of video-based performer tracking, which I'll talk about in a bit.
Calculon. That's black.
Skip
Your
ahead a
hands
bit.
there. We should ask Grace.
Species.
Another
We're
example
not
of
sure if it would
using
be
that
too
blob.
crowded if we brought Shifter in with this lucky dandy.
Oh, something else is being tested too.
We're using
All
a
the
screen
time.
space
You wouldn't
reflection
believe all kinds of
pre-made
stuff
I
that
guess that's
I
why they
forget
call
the
you
person's name,
testers.
but it's on GitHub to add a little bit of realism.
This one's quick.
Users can submit strings of text with their channel points as well, so we use that for things like
Yes or no on
suspicious
whether we
activity
bring
reports,
Shifter in
which is
right
all
now.
lore-based,
Yes, if it's
satirical gameplay.
fine.
And I guess I should also
Now,
say
if
that
it's just too darn crowded.
our channel is a sci-fi fictional
Okay.
world set in the year 3022, where the users, we call them testers, they're QA testing a series of clones, and Dandy portrays the clones. We used to have this
I like
dashboard at the bottom that tells people what to do, but it was too much, so we got rid of it in 2022. This is Shifter, which is user-generated content, and they can send images that
Blob goo.
Shifter becomes. Here's another scene. This is the stasis tube where Dandy's floating, and her video feed's being warped a bit. We're waiting for the testers to check in to begin the main show.
Good. Yes. If you're already entered, we got
And here's an example of our dolly cam, which Dandy controls with her wireless numpad. So she has a numpad that's just a USB wireless numpad, which I've mapped to. I intercept it with a program, which then translates it to MIDI inputs, which TouchDesigner can listen to. Furthermore, we also have video feedback effects that Dandy can use for dancing performances. So, and then there's a tomato that viewers can send in that can hit her.
a lot of time. This is Space
Um,
Puppy.
This is
version
earlier
2.
this year. We got a
Awesome.
puppy, so we made up some games where the audience had to sort of guess which item the puppy would choose first. You can see there's a varying degree of polish on the scenes. This one's pretty rough,
Down,
and
down, down.
for a two-person
she gets
team,
on trees.
trying to do high levels of polish is very expensive. So we always try and find a sweet spot of what what looks good or not. There, her mustache fell off. I think she just pulled it. In the,
No, this is high-end VFX.
yeah, high-end VFX.
Yeah.
So you can see the shadows here all over the place. This is one of the sloppier scenes. This was me trying to learn how to project textures onto simpler geometry to fake a more complex room. Another example of using the red chroma keying to create a cursor a UV cursor. So this allows Dandi to draw on the canvas. So we were experimenting with a little mini game where she was trying to paint as much of the wall as possible, but then the users have this black cursor that they can fight her painting with. That was just a very short-lived idea. This one was cool. Here I'm using a second orthographic camera to detect where Dandi is with more precision. And so with this one, let me fast forward. There's a laser there, so you can see it's hitting her, or she can go under it and it misses her. And then also there's these lava pits. So if they touch her based on where she's standing in XZ space, there'll be like an effect like it's hurting her. There's some shortcomings to the video-based performer tracking. Like when she jumps, it doesn't know how to interpret that. So I'll talk about that in a minute.
To get to know one another, to get to know. Oh.
This is a little test pod thing we've built. I'm not sure exactly why I saved this.
To know you a little bit better. I am being decommissioned.
What? Does anyone see this green line here?
Yep.
Yeah.
Did I draw on the screen share by accident? Yeah, here she's being decommissioned. So one of the clones failed the QA testing process. So the testers are decommissioning her using funky effects. I think that's
So
all
like
the
in
videos I prepped.
so like in each show, Dandi is a new clone, and the audience determines whether she is decommissioned or not, whether she's approved or not, and if she's decommissioned, there's a decommissioning sequence where basically everything shakes out and she disappears, and you have to clean up and bring in a new clone.
Yeah, that's right. So at the end, after her decommissioning is complete, she's done.
Yeah.
And then she disappears and goes into storage or what have you.
Yeah, so it's kind of tragic that she actually may die a couple of times in a show.
Yeah, exactly.
And
So
you don't know if she will or not, because it's really audience determined.
yeah.
So is there like a cohesive story over all of these streams?
Yeah, so we've done over 500 iterations of this clone, and there used to be more story, but story is very expensive for a team of 2. So we sort of toned it down and reeled it back. And right now we're at a bit of a crossroads in terms of where to take it. The number 666 has a lot of significance in the lore, and we're about 100 away from that. So we're figuring out exactly what to do with that storyline. But there's been all kinds of like infiltrations from groups that are against cloning and that are for clone rights, and from hacker groups. So when Sushi Dragon visited remotely into our VR world, he played a character that was a hacker. So all kinds of tangents that unfortunately many of them don't get resolved because it's so much work to write and develop and art direct and perform. So right now we're figuring out how to streamline things. Now I see an annotate thing. Let's see, can I clear all drawings? There we go. I annotated something by accident, or someone did. I don't know if
someone did. Yeah, they just wrote in the chat. Right.
So, so yeah, already we're 20 minutes in, and all I've done is show the videos. I'm gonna try and fly through some of the favorite components. So for each slide, I'm going to try and go into the network and just give an overview. I'm not going to explain in any real depth how anything works or what the logic is. I'm just going to give kind of I'm going to try and explain our approach in hopes that people find it interesting or might be able to be inspired by it. First is how we connect to Twitch. So TouchDesigner does not connect to Twitch by itself. You have to build some kind of bridge. Thankfully, there's third-party tools, and we've used a few in the past, and there are some components that people have built, such as one called Twitcher, which runs inside of Twitch itself, inside of TouchDesigner itself, to listen for various events that can happen on Twitch. There are over 10 types of events that can take place on Twitch. The most common is the chat, because every stream has a chat on the side. It's basically just fancy IRC with proprietary emotes. Channel point redeems are like loyalty points. So the longer you watch, the more you get these points. One unique thing that we do is that we automatically refund any points you spend, so that you don't actually have to save your points and accumulate them. As many as you ever got, you're just going to get more and more. And so you get elevated privileges by watching our stream more. Bits is like the Twitch currency, which you can purchase and then send to the streamer. That's the type of event that we listen for and use as a trigger in our TouchDesigner file. So depending on how many bits you send, it's a different trigger. Subs, gift subs, and community subs are things that you can buy for yourself or for others. And a community sub is when you buy like N number of subs. You can gift 5 or 10 subs to the community, and it gets chosen randomly. So these are all events that we also use. Tips, although they're not native to Twitch, we do use them via Stream Elements, because the app we use can listen for them. So there's bits, subs, tips. Those are the 3 monetized types of, I guess, microtransactions or triggers. One of our challenges has been how to balance triggers that are free or just loyalty based versus payables, and it's a never-ending, thing to try and figure out. Raids is when someone comes into your stream and brings all their followers, all their viewers that they had on their session into your session. New follows, and a hype train is when lots of subs and donos come in. So there's the reason I'm outlining all this is because one of the realities of trying to use Twitch as your platform and your source of triggers is, unlike a live installation, you have to interpret all of these and parse them very reliably. We use a third-party app called StreamerBot. It doesn't look very fancy. It's just a lot of tabs, and there's a under platforms that supports Twitch and YouTube, and we can send in test events as well. And this app is amazing because it has a WebSocket server that we can connect to via Twitch to listen for all these events. So I'm going to open up Touch. So I have 2 instances of Touch. This one is my web server instance. And in it, I have a WebSocket, which is subscribed to StreamerBot, and it's when it connects, it subscribes to these events that I described earlier. They come in as JSON, and then we parse them in my other instance, which is the main instance. And we parse them into 6 variables. So every single one of those event types comes in as a type, subtype, username, amount, message, and a time. A lot of the time, these are empty fields. So like when there's a follow, Boiling Sky just followed probably a few minutes ago. So it's just a follow in. And so the cool thing about StreamerBot is that it's quite reliable, and we don't have to develop it and maintain it to make sure it stays connectable to Twitch, because the Twitch API changes with some frequency. So by using a third-party bridge, we're able to, count on that coming in without us having to do maintenance. I have an event spacer here, which just has a little LFO to send in to space out the events, because if you have multiple events coming in within the space of a single frame, Touch will miss the first of those events. It'll only get the last one. So I just have this on a 500 millisecond delay.
Yeah. but maybe it if you use the callback on the FIFO, it'll catch every event.
Yeah, and there's ways to optimize it.
Yeah.
One of the realities for us has been that once we get something working, we move on to the next thing.
Yeah,
and we
you don't
only
want to touch it.
optimize if it breaks, because
Mhm.
there's so many moving parts.
Yeah.
Yeah. I find it very relaxing to go back and optimize stuff, but it's like a rare luxury.
Yeah. Therapy.
Yeah, it's therapeutic. And once when annotation boxes came out, like that was just Christmas for me to be able to see this screen. Imagine if this without annotation boxes is a complete mess.
Yeah, sorry it took so long.
So I'll move on to the next thing that I think is interesting, is the video-based performer tracking. So what's happening here is you can see that the video feed that we have of Dandi, which is chroma keyed, it's moving in space, both in the z-axis and in terms of scaling. And so what's happening is the further it is away from the camera, the bigger it has to be to make up for the fact that it's moving further away, because we don't want it to look smaller, right? The footage is what it is. And when it's being viewed from the angle of the camera, it has to look proper. Like that, this shot that we're looking at here looks like this from the front. So she's on a rectangle right now that's moving in Z space, but you can't tell because it's being scaled at the same time. So I'll just give a quick walkthrough of how we do that. And we didn't have a Connect when we started the show. We just had to figure out how to do it with our camera. So we have a geo called Dandi New, and in it we do a few things. So first we take the chroma greened video feed, and we superimpose it with green and red ramp so that we can analyze. There we go. So we superimpose it with green and red so that we can analyze the position of the highest, lowest, average, leftmost, rightmost pixels that are not transparent. And by analyzing these values, we're able to then use a top two and generate UV values. Okay, so we can get the average U, average V, minimum and maximum V. And that then allows us to basically get this data. So by superimposing the green and red ramps or gradients, we're able to know where to look in the scene, in the shot, I should say, for certain important points. And this is important in the next step because we're using a render pick at this lowest point here to determine where Dandi is in 3D space. Of course, this is imperfect because, you know, if her hand moves down in front, our system thinks that that's the lowest point of her. If there's a dog in the scene over here, the camera's gonna, the UV is gonna get confused. So this only really works if it's a clean shot and there's only one performer. Connect can track 2 or up to 4 performers, I think.
Yeah, this is cool. It's like a bounding box tracker, and then you said you're using render pick on the bottom point to do what? So
That's
you're sending
right.
so you're not using a manual mouse interaction with render pick. You're just sending it a U and V value.
Yeah. So I have a render here. The geo is it's invisible. Let me see if I can wireframe it. Yeah, so it's just a rectangle, and it's doing a render pick on the floor at that point, at this lowest point, to spit out TX, TY, TZ, or just TX and TZ.
Great trick.
So I'm getting a TZ and a T. And so this is how I determine where Dandi is in the scene. The problem with this is twofold. Render picks are very expensive. If you want to do it on this cook. So I just changed to this cook and it jumped from half
Whoa.
to like 8 milliseconds.
Yep.
And this creates a 1-frame lag where sometimes her foot will be in the floor. So I'm sure that if I use the lookup table instead of calculating in real time, that I could do it with no delay, but it's not a big deal.
Yeah, there's also another, there's array trace or array something, array SOP that may help you. You give it a direction and it tells you where you intersect a 3D object, like a SOP. So that might be another way to using array SOP. But anyway, go ahead.
Next time I'm taking
next time you're doing a new show, a completely different. Yeah, okay. Don't change to this one though.
Yeah, so I have this, I have a quick select. So just a select that uses a global link, even though it's selecting this, because I can then copy paste this into anywhere that I need to use these values, which is quite a few places around the project where I care where Dandi's standing.
Cool.
This is all being, so I have, this is the final composite of the shot with suit effects, even though so we're using a blue chroma, and I'll go over that to add suit effects, and that's being put onto a Fong, and that Fong is being put onto that rectangle that I showed earlier. So this rectangle, anywhere we have this geo being rendered, Dandi is in that scene. It falls apart when you look at it from the side, because then she's 0 thickness. But it looks pretty good when it's in front. Even if you move around a bit, it's fairly consistent. You can see that the feet they stay pretty much at the same height, if I'm at the right angle. So it served us well. It's clunky, lots of caveats and gotchas with this, but it's okay.
Yeah.
I'm
sure it doesn't bother anybody.
Questions about this? Sorry, what's that?
Yeah, I'm sure it doesn't bother anybody watching it. Everybody knows that this is a gag.
Yeah. Okay. The next component that I'll touch on is our video feedback system. So we use this a lot as part of Dandi's performance and art. I think that Dandi's one of the best video feedback performers that I've ever seen. I think I think that you have to strike a balance between like too much going on in front of you and too little when it comes to video feedback, because it's very easy for feedback to get out of hand. But I'll talk to the technicals of it. We double the resolution of the video because we do a lot of scaling and translation, and so we do it in 4K instead of 1080p because then there's fewer artifacts in the cache. We scale and translate the feedback via presets and use feedback and cache tops to provide the infinite mirror effect. You can see in this example here that the trail does not go forever. It actually has, I think, 20 or 30 instances before it stops. Yeah, right. So we do that by using a slight fade and a threshold to limit how many times it copies itself, which I'll go into. And then we also have a manual BPM tap to set the sort of delay between each iteration. So I'll just jump into our network here. And I'll go back to the root, and then I have a video feedback base here. So I'll just try and fly through this. First, we double the resolution of our things that are being rendered. I'm going to unrender a lot of stuff right now. There. And I'm going to clear the cache. There we go. So the feedback top is 1 frame behind. I have a lookup table here, like for our presets that tell us how to position the next, the cache in terms of scale, translation, and whether we flip it. And that's being used to control these tops that occur in the loop. So from the feedback, we set the size, we set the translation and whether we flip it. And then we, there's so much going on here. I'm not even sure exactly where to hone in on and what to show, what not to show. Like maybe first I'll show just how it works. So we have a couple different modes. We have, let me speed up the delay. So this is a mode that has a limited trail length. So there's only so many of her. We have a mode that's also infinite trail length with fades. And we have one that's infinite trail length with full solid. And let me talk about the one where there's a limited trail length. I'm going to assume that if you're going to do video feedback, you probably understand how to just do the basic, which is feed it back into the loop and then put it behind the original and composite. Here, what we're doing is I'm actually fading this. I'm fading every iteration of feedback to 99%. And what that does is it gives this threshold enough data to clip out anything that's beyond a certain transparency. And that allows it to only keep so much of the cache. Now, does that make sense, Greg?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So we can determine by changing how much to threshold, we can make the trail shorter like that or longer like that. And then after all that, we just half the resolution, go back to what it was. So there's a lot of scripts here that we use for clearing the cache, for going between presets, for going between the different fade modes. And Dandi controls all of that with the wireless numpad. So yeah, we use that pretty much every stream, and we're expanding on it constantly.
I see. So she's just controlling all your parameters and your presets and stuff like that on the fly with while she's walking around. Well, that's
Exactly.
great.
Yeah. So you can here. I'll just show it. I'll use the numpad now to just go between different settings, so I can just change the different presets.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, I was actually wondering, are you during the live stream, are you sitting there and controlling stuff, or is it you're just building it and she's controlling it while performing?
Right. So I'm only doing mostly scene switching, and I'm performing as Fixer the robot. So there I can move Fixer around with the controller. And oh, I accidentally turned on a secondary suit effect here. But yeah, she's controlling all the visuals. Like I don't really interfere with the artistic side of the performance.
But you bring in and out elements kind of.
I can, but again, it's like if she hits tab on the numpad, it switches to this mode. And if she hits it again, it starts to render the whole scene again. So I try and leave as much in her hands, because if we fall out of sync, she'll get thrown off. And she also has a stream deck, which is like a wired piece of hardware that she can walk up to and do all kinds of stuff.
Oh yeah.
Let me just turn off the feedback effects here. Don't know why that switched. Okay, so moving along, we have a viewer joining system. We used to use, so in that big scene with the clunky looking avatars at the beginning, we used to just use geo instancing. but the only version we really kept is this one that uses connect blobs, which takes Dandi's connect version. Well, I didn't mean that. Connect copies the metaballs into humanoid form and instances them. So we're using Dandi's skeleton data to just merge a few metaballs into this shape. And then we, based on people who use chat commands, they get joined to a table, which is where we draw our instancing from. So for every person that typed in !join, there's one instance of this blob. They can also add a 3-digit string for setting the color of their blob. Now, this is something that's maybe a little bit hard to fully showcase. So I'll just do a quick overview, and I have to switch scenes to show it. So I'm going to show you how that works. So I'm going to hit, this is my control panel UI, which I'll go over at the end. I just hit the mind spa scene, which, because when I'm uncooking stuff, the TouchDesigner hangs while it's loading, so there's a loading screen. Then I hit this to hide the loading screen, and now we have this new scene. In this new scene, I can manually add some test blobs. And right now I'm using recorded connect data, which is why it doesn't match with Dandi's video. So otherwise, these blobs typically match how she's moving. So this is the connect data. In there, and this is a pre-made, this isn't something I made. I stole this and just edited out to keep some of the skeleton. And then I use a copy top with the meta ball to apply those meta balls at those positions, which spits out that shape. Again, that's not something I made up. This is, I think, pretty common. And then we're using instancing in that geo to copy it cheaply. That's why they move completely in tandem. Even though our viewers have asked for like, hey, can you add some delays or make them unique? We don't have an easy way of doing that right now, unless I were to use some kind of delay in the SOP and then have two sets of instances.
Yeah, you could have delays of SOP, exactly. But that just highlights how expensive making a metaball shape out of well, the primitives is. So you only want to do it once, and then instance it a bunch of times.
Absolutely. Where's
it's probably a good question.
It's actually not bad. Did you guys optimize this? Because I think it used to be worse.
I'll say we did, but I don't think so. Yeah, we optimized everything in the last release. Yeah, okay.
The reason I have this trail here is because this was taking a really long time. So I'm kind of blown away that it's only 0.02 seconds.
Okay. I'm not gonna say anything.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I'm using, we can, how do I demo this? Okay, so I'll just do, no, I should have tested this before the presentation. The point being that like we allow viewers to type in a command which adds them to this joins table. And for each row here, we have an instance being sent to the geos. So yeah, I'll just skip ahead then.
That's cool. And well, hang on, and then you had the props and stuff like that they could add on. I saw a hat and stuff like that. That's done with another
so let me demonstrate. So if someone, this is streamer bot again, so I can send in a fake
command,
a fake Twitch event where there it is. So let's do a Twitch. Okay, so this person in the back, there we go. I was trying to remember how to use. So this person got a Viking hat because they sent a sub. So the way we're doing that is we're just using a secondary table, and then moving this geo to the place that matches that person's blob. I made this quite a while ago, so I don't actually remember exactly where those are, but there's the Viking table. And so, or not table, but it's a chop because it's only a single hat that we have. And then we send that off to match the position of that blob.
Right. So all the Viking hats get represented as in trim Viking as separate samples, I guess.
Yeah.
Multiple ones. Yeah. And they get the username as well.
Yeah.
Floating.
Then when they send in a string of 3 colors after they join, we parse that into RGB here. So then we spit out their color as well.
Cool.
Just as a quick info, you're around 45 minutes now. So
okay, sounds good. So let's go to the quick Q talks. This is a really quick one. And the reason I bring this up is not because it's technically like unique or impressive. It's because it's so important when people are paying for things to happen on your stream. You don't want them to happen over each other. And so it's important to let, one instance finish before starting a new one. So this we have the ceiling crusher, for example. Let's pull it up. So bring the camera back. Let's see. Let's go to StreamerBot and go cheers. I think 69 is. And it's not firing. Great. Oh, because we're not in fun mode. Yes.
Test mode commencing.
There we go. So I'll send in a fake event. Okay, so there's this crusher we have. And when someone pays 69 bits, it sends the crusher in. And then Dandy's supposed to avoid it. That has to finish before, if someone else sends 69 bits before it plays again. So in the pertinent geo, which is walls crusher, I have a queue system. This queue system takes a table of events. It can just be any unique string. And this comp that I built plays or runs whatever script is in the second table that I feed it until some pertinent script down the line that's fired by that DAT tells this line to clear. So in here, inside of this comp, there's just a little bit of logic that says when something appears here like this. So I just added 3. So let's imagine 3 people paid for this. This timer runs. And then a second timer runs. And at the end of this timer, I pulse the end parameter on the quick queue, which is this. When that gets pulsed, this row clears and then the next row plays like that. So again, it's nothing complicated. I just wanted to mention this because it's something that we use pretty much more than anything else as part of live streaming when your interactives are payable and you don't want them to overlap.
That's terrific. Nice simple implementation of queuing and triggering the next sequence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if anyone wants this talks, just message me. I'm happy to share it.
Yeah, great.
Okay, so I think I got 3 more slides. I'll try and blow through them because 8:50. The scene system is, oh boy. So the scene system is, I'm not going to go into the specifics. I'm just going to show how I do it because like Bileam, you built something recently that you posted and I'm blown away by it. And there's other builds of scene and preset management systems. this is kind of the most bare bones, but completely made for our situation system. And this is probably the third generation of this project, of a scene system in this project. And as a funny side note, this toe is the very first toe I ever created. So there's a lot of old, outdated stuff in here. Anyway, the current scene system works like this. I have a base for each scene that exists. And inside of each base, there's a top that starts with the string camera underscore, and then the name of the camera we want to use, lights, and the name of the lights we want to use, geo underscore, and any of the geos that have, these are all global geo names, and the background. So when I go into another scene, it has a lot more stuff in it. These are all geos. So this is a really easy way for me to add and remove and move components between scenes, from scenes to scenes. And every time that something appears in a scene, the scene changer looks for those geos and cooks and uncooks them. So these are all the geos in the project.
Yeah.
And it cooks and uncooks everything based on which scene I'm in. The reason that I'm doing cooking on cooking, which is arguably not the best practice, instead of using the pull-based system, is because there have been times in the past where I wasn't sure why something was cooking, and it was cheaper to just make a system that shuts it down than to dig back through something I built before and find out why it's cooking. If I were to do this again, I would probably do something more pull-based, or use one of the existing systems that one of the geniuses in the community is building. So yeah, that's all I'll say about the scenes. Chroma keying, I'll just touch on this real quick, because people, I've had multiple people message me that they're struggling with chroma keying in Touch. The way we do it, we take the raw feed, we double the res because it gives us slightly fewer jaggies. We do a fairly unaggressive chroma key that leaves quite a bit of green around. So let me just pause the recording. So you can see there's quite a bit of green in our chroma key, which means that we're not removing too much, even if it's polluted by the room. But then what we do is we do a second pass. We select just that greenish edge and we desaturate it like so, and then composite it back in. And so what we get is a much less green outline without killing too much of the subject. So we do a second pass as well, which is chroma blue, because Dandi always wears some blue in the show. And we're able to just apply effects to just the blue suit. So right now, the effect we have turned on is the sparkles effect. And we composite that back onto where there's blue and put that back on top of her. So it ends up looking like this. One cool payable that people can do is random suit color. So we also have an underlying layer. So now she's a different color. So we have multiple layers of suit effects.
It's so cool.
And then that gets all sent to the geo and gets composited into the scene. And then what else we got left? I think the last. What was that?
How are the sparkles isolated to her suit only?
Well, let me take a little detour.
Sure. Yeah.
So here's the suit effects. So I got some noise, I got some processing, and then I take a matte to just that.
Yeah.
I use a matte comp to only put the base, the base of the sparkle there. Then I do two blurs. I do one in one 45-degree direction and one in the other one.
Okay, great.
I add a multiply to that to make it brighter, and I just composite it all with.
Okay, perfect. That's great. Nice and simple.
Oh, and the important thing here is that I'm using from the beginning of my presentation, the U data of where Dandi's standing. Actually, it's not U, it's the U and V. So both up, down, left, right movements will cause the noise to shift as she moves and to not shift as she doesn't move. So that's why the sparkles look like they're only shimmering when she moves and not when
Right.
she's not moving.
Amazing. Great.
It's really
Okay,
clever.
so
Test timer complete.
okay.
This dandy has failed.
So wireless numpad is mini. I'll fly through this. I use a brilliant program that is, I don't know if it's even being in development right now. But one of the problems with trying to remap buttons on keyboards is that most programs cannot distinguish between different HIDs of different keyboards. This program can. It's called Universal Control Remapper. I intercept this keyboard I have. And by intercept, I mean that I prevent Windows from registering its key presses. And then I output those intercepted key presses as various MIDI
Oh, wow.
events. And how do I edit it?
Interesting. So it's like a separate keyboard, but Windows has been blocked from recognizing it, and you can do what you want with it. Oh,
I can do what I want with it. So this this numpad now acts as a MIDI controller, and I have a MIDI in here. Now, this is the most spaghetti portion of the.
Oh, you're going to jail. You're going to jail.
Yeah. Here, let me just quickly collapse this. So this is a MIDI in, and every time I press a button on the numpad, touch registers it, which is important because by default, touch does not have that many keys that it recognizes, and also it has to be in focus to recognize keyboard presses. This is a workaround for all that.
Wow.
And it's really important because these are really these are a dime a dozen, so it can enable anyone to have a remote controller.
Cool.
So there's a bunch of stuff I didn't cover. So I'll skip through this for now. I'll give a little overview picture of what the studio looks like. We have a single PC that has touch. There's another one here for Dandi to control some of the music playback. There's a giant TV here where Dandi can read chat. This is our A6000 Sony camera with a 16mm prime lens. We have a bunch of really cheap, disturbingly cheap LED lights from Amazon and some diffusion sheets, because the less harsh shadows that we get on the green, the better. And then we use wireless mics. We have karaoke style mics as well as a headset. From the other angle, this is what Dandi sees. This is I think it's a 50-inch TV, and the chat is big enough that she can read it from the other side of the room. She has a second monitor for when she's rolling around. There's props strewn all over the place, a workout program for when we're doing the weekend workout streams. This is like 3 different generations of green, chroma green, because we kept adding. It started from just a small panel until we covered a whole wall, and then 2 walls, and then the ceiling.
Is that your script for the show on the floor?
What's that?
Is that your script for the show on the floor?
Yeah, this is the workout program for the weekend streams right here. And some reminders for how to use the keypad, because I'm always changing it. Right here, it's quite small to see, but this is the stream deck. So this has little buttons that actually have screens on them, LEDs. So I can change what each button shows on it.
Wow.
And lastly, there is this is my UI. So I see which Twitch events are coming in. I see some permanent controls. Like if I want to pause the recording, or, stuff that I always might want to do. This is quick links for network, for floating network pop-ups. There's a lot of network bases that I need to go to really quickly, but only for a split second. So when I click one of these buttons, it gives me like that specific network. This is where I go between scenes and turn off the loading screen. And then here, this section is cool because I built it to have every geo that's being cooked has a UI component that has a standardized name. If it matches that name, it shows up in this section, and only if it's being cooked. Otherwise, it disappears from here. So this is a dynamic area. So depending on which scene I'm in, the contents of this change, and they give me different buttons.
I see. So some of the buttons are toggles for on and off, and some of them are oh yeah, triggers, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, so I have let's see, where's my, yeah, so this is the show. Let's do that. So I have Sam in the mind spa here. So I just switched scenes. So that went to loading. I clicked here to hide the loading screen. I have a slider here where I can like show people. If we get a Patreon pledge during the stream, we do that as a little perk.
Good.
I can see for this scene, I can kick all the blobs and clear the hats. So now they're all gone. And so I can change various other, I can pause the recording here. I can change it to a holographic effect, etc. So yeah, so when I switch to the test pod scene, you can see this area here updated, and now I have a completely different set of controls. So yeah, that's I think basically it.
So like when you're doing a show, are you ever popping into and out of designer mode, or is it all perform mode with a quick network coming up every now and again from your buttons that you showed at the bottom left?
It's the buttons in the bottom left because if I go into full design mode, it hides Dandi's monitors. So we have 4 monitors, and the perform mode is a single window that spans 3 of those monitors. So I only use the network pop-up buttons to get a sort of a quick dive into a pertinent component that needs a bug fix. And like every 2 or 3 shows, I need to go in there and something's broken because we're always changing stuff.
Yeah. So in the pop-up network, you can navigate anywhere, but with kind of restricted a little bit, but at least you can get at stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, it's in a perfect world, I'd never have to go in, but I really do have to dive in.
Yeah. I mean, what do you have any kind of like when things go really wrong? Do you have any kind of workarounds and stuff like that to keep the show going, kind of thing, or do you?
Honestly, no. And that's one of the realities of Twitch is people are understanding if you need to like shut down and restart TouchDesigner or OBS or whatever. Like sometimes there's sometimes the mics will be crackling, and it's because of some kind of buffer issue or mismatched sample rates. And so you just say, hey, I'll be back in 1 minute, and then you do your thing. It's funny though how when something goes wrong, if I'm like focused on the performance, I'll go into the network to try and fix something, and my mind just goes blank, even though I was like in it all day. It's just like a weird nervous thing.
It's the threshold of panic. So can you talk a little bit about audio? You're triggering audio, but you have stuff in the background. You're doing an audio mix, maybe on a mixer or near you. And can you talk a little bit about all that?
We try and keep it really simple. So in terms of audio routing, I'd say one of the most important things is, well, two important things. One is we use desktop audio to monitor and to output to the stream. So we mix our desktop into the final feed. So if we hear it, it's in the stream, end of story. Secondly, we keep the mics, we route them through a separate OBS instance for filtering.
Oh yeah.
And so that way we can send that off to, like, if we're guesting somewhere else or using other apps, we keep that just isolated to an OBS instance that has a vocal filter. So I can be talking full volume here and it won't pick up on Dandi's mics, which is further important because Dandi plays music very loud to dance to, and that can't be picked up in the mics.
Right.
But it's not a very complicated setup. Like, we just have a simple audio interface that gets all the mics into one input, and then all the music and effects play to the desktop sound, which gets mixed into the main OBS instance.
Like some of your gags have like a trigger to play a short video, like the hand coming up and other things like that. So there's a audio associated with often audio associated with a video loop. Is that like one movie file that you just pick the audio, or do you have it as separate audio files from video
We
files?
have, I mean, I have a base that's just all the sounds, and then
Mhm.
I just trigger them from there. Like it really
Yeah.
has to be my approach is everything needs to be exposed and kind of not deep inside of nested bases because
Right.
of how much I'm jumping around.
Yeah.
And so things are very close to the surface and very simple. I try and when I'm doing triggering audio, I really try and just use the play chop, the audio play chop.
Audio play, yeah.
Yeah, and it's performing better than it used to, thankfully, because sometimes you get some crackling.
Mhm.
But now, especially with 2022, there's way fewer drop frames and way fewer audio pauses and
Glitches.
crackles.
Yeah, amazing. That's great. So like, do you find you get to a point where you have to optimize stuff because it's not getting you're not getting your 30 frames per second and have to go fishing around and try to optimize parts of your networks?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that's a constant battle, but thankfully with the perform palette and the performance monitor, usually it's one troublesome
Yeah.
op. Like, so
Yeah.
in the last month, one of the ops was a divide SOP, which I was generating like a billion triangle SOP, and for some reason, even though it wasn't updating, it was taking up a ton of CPU. And then also trying to use render picks and analyze tops. So if either of those, if you have them on slow mode, which waits for the data inside of the frame that you ask for it,
Yeah.
it's going to delay the whole chain
Yeah.
by 10 milliseconds. And so you can't, you know, it's a trade-off.
Yeah. Yeah, because you have to wait. The whole problem is the CPU has to wait for the GPU to finish something, and that can consume like 6 milliseconds just waiting
But
around.
that's
So
the
it's just
thing,
gonna...
when compared to using OBS, it's really a dream to work in Touch because it's faster out of, you know, off the shelf. It's faster, especially if you're just compositing simple graphics like tops, 2D graphics. It's so fast. I'm doing like 50 overs and multiplies and other composites every frame. That's insane to me that happens in less than 30 milliseconds. And
Yeah.
And not only that, but you can see exactly what's taking up all your CPU, which you can't do in OBS. And OBS is the main compositing program that 99% of Twitch streamers use.
Oh,
So
yeah,
if
yeah.
anyone here is on the fence about Touch, yeah, take the leap and DM me. I'll help you out.
The question I had, and that's also in the chat actually, like about the backgrounds of your scenes. Are those created outside of TouchDesigner? Are those inside of TouchDesigner? If they're created with another software, what is that software?
Yeah, I very sporadically will import a model from Blender or stock site, but I try and keep all the scenes very simple because then I can build them in Touch, and I try and build them all in Touch. Of course, modeling in Touch is not its main purpose, so you have to really stick to basic stuff and use sprites or like plates instead of complex geometry to create complexity. I'll just quickly do a screen share here. So this one here, these are all 2D, just all the foliage is 2D, and it's just made to face the camera.
Right.
Okay.
So this was all done in Touch, but it took forever because this was before I made a component that I call the object mover. I literally clicked on each instance and hand placed it. And thankfully it came out really nice, but it was also just killing CPU. Like I'm barely hitting 30 FPS here.
And that's just like 100 polygons with the textures on them, right?
Yeah, exactly. And they're all made they're using the look at parameter to look at the camera. So which is like an old technique in video games, in like Doom or Duke Nukem 3D. You'd have the sprites always facing the camera. And it's a very cheap way to just create complexity without using 3D polygons. But more recently, I made an object mover that just lets me map Xbox controller axes to the XYZ translate. And so if I select an object, I can scale it and move it with an Xbox controller by looking at it. And it's a lot quicker. So maybe that's an RFE right here for you, Greg.
Yeah. You built your own modeling system with Xbox controller. Okay, I get the message. Which leads me to another question. But what kind of stuff do you want from derivative? I mean, you're really good on the forum about helping other people and giving suggestions and analyzing people's problems, but also giving small UI RFEs and other things that you come across which are just inconsistent. So, I appreciate your input. It's actually quite useful, and we do listen, even though things we don't respond immediately to everything, as you can expect.
Sure. Well,
but any bigger things that overall that would make
I mean, my bias is because we build a lot of scenes, and the next stages of this project, they're going to require more and more scenes. And so having to step into Blender or something else and import stuff is a huge time. It takes a lot of time. And so there's just a couple of things that would maybe help with that would be having the ability to maybe round the corners of geometry so that not everything looks quite so low poly, or the ability to model slightly more complex things in a kind of a drawing style, like a sculpting style, because everything's so parametric. But I don't think that's really the purpose of touch, unfortunately. So
no, but
when
I think
say that, it's really wishful thinking. I don't know that it's something that would make sense to add.
For a long time, I've wanted to get into more gestural drawing, or more things like Illustrator and stuff like that. Just simple modeling by just stroking. And so that's one thing that's definitely on our list. Like we kind of took a small step forward towards like better interactive modeling with the camera viewport component, which lets you at least look at a render and tumble a render around and stuff like that. So that's the viewing part of it, and we're going to go farther in terms of like modifying geometry interactively from that point onwards. But we're this year we're on kind of a UI mission and a 3D mission, so these things will all be taken account of. But
I mean, you could argue that I should just learn Unreal if I want to get into complex sculpting and placement of objects and fast rendering and easier transparency and materials.
Transparency made a lot easier. It's kind of mysterious. Okay. Any other questions from the chat?
I don't think so. Was one question, but I think like I can even answer if there's anybody else apart from Dandi performing, because but I don't know, right? It's just
we have guests that come in. So last week we had a couple of guests come in, which of course breaks the performer tracking, at least for one of the performers. But and then I perform as the little robot sometimes, and I'll occasionally go in front of the camera too. But it's it's a very kind of DIY cheap show. It's a very lean team. We had several months ago a mandate for 2 months to invite a guest every week, and so they would send us their video and audio feed, and we would composite them into the scene and track them with the duplicate of that tracking system. And it actually worked. So long as they sent us full green, we could track them. And Lovey Loves You, who is in the viewers here, has guested on our stream multiple times. And it's always great fun, but like setting up video routing, audio routing, echo cancellation, all that stuff with remote guests and a performance is like very time consuming.
How often are you actually doing these streams?
It varies. We sort of took a couple months off very recently here. Now we're back to about 3 times a week.
Okay.
Hoping to get back up to 4, because you mostly only make money when you're doing it, when you're live, aside from things like Patreon.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Yes. So what's involved in when you're planning and preparing for a specific show? Like you're creating maybe some new content, but just the whole ideas and whatever. And of course, every show has a lot of variability that you don't expect, i.e., clones get.
Yeah.
But yeah, how do you do your planning or?
Yeah, we try and we sort of have like 3 scales of planning. We have the kind of the lore for the year, and then we have what are the main beats for this month, and then like what's happening today. Are we adding anything new? And it's typically a balance between, are we adding something that's more story and lore based today, or are we adding like an interactive feature or something more technical? And usually it's just one of those things that gets added. But so often you're thinking about usability and moving payable interactives. And so the idea of like having a big vision for the lore gets sidelined, because you has to be a business. So
you got to pay the bills.
The analogy I used with you when we first talked was that Twitch is like a big carnival, and every streamer is one of the shows. And so people who are watching Twitch are walking through this carnival, and they pop into a million rooms. And as they do that, they choose which room to spend time in and which room to leave $1 in. And so you're having to convince people who've only been watching you for 30 seconds or 60 seconds that they should stick around and maybe throw you $1. And
amazing.
so they don't know that you added a feature today that you spent 3 days working on. To them, it's just, oh, hey, cool show. And then they leave. And so it's like as from a business standpoint, you have to balance planning things that appease the long-term viewers with things that appease first timers who've just popped in.
Right. So you're so you think it's just the normal MO of Twitch is that you have quick visitors who kind of come in and disappear, but that's just the way it is. You don't kind of stress about it. That's just the way it is, and you hope to do something for them, and they drop some coin and in one of the rewards. Isabel has a question.
Yes, you may have mentioned this already and I missed it, but are you, I remember when we were working on the article, you were looking for someone to help out with the workload, and I'm wondering if you found someone, and or if you're doing all this yourself.
Right. Yeah. We I contacted like 100 people, and 20 or so of those people, I created a Google document that was a bounty board, and I shared it with them. And and then people would look at it, and if something caught their eye, they'd say, oh, I can totally build that for that much. And we did that for 2 or 3 months. And it was good in that I was able to just ask for something and then exchange a bit of revenue for that thing delivered. But the overhead of managing such a list and reviewing people's work, and then taking something that's built with a certain TouchDesigner style and integrating it into your own framework is a ton of overhead. So we sort of put that on the back burner until we can grow our team properly. I think ideally we would need to find someone that actually is in office with us.
That you can kind of train and follow the standards that you have for content and development and pull things from the outside, but be able to polish it for exactly your system. That's the same thing in at Derivative is the same kind of thing, because we have to follow strict standards internally for naming things and using component shortcuts and blah 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 blah. There's a gazillion things that and Python. So it's not an easy thing to just pull things in from outside. You really have to polish stuff and rework things and refactor things. So you're experiencing the same thing in production.
Absolutely. Yeah, and like if you want to uphold a standard, you have to really, you have to be kind of a bit of an asshole about it, and it takes energy to do that.
Yeah. So on our end, I think I was talking about this with Jarrett yesterday, and we would like to put out a couple of videos of the standards that we follow generally, that other people can generally follow too. But it's in one way, it's good to see it kind of free range open, because we just see how people use the software in different ways, and sometimes in an unexpected better way. Like for instance, Keith Lestracos taught us a whole bunch of things that, oh yeah, wow, you do things that way, that's brilliant, thanks. So we get a lot of good influence from people diverging from the usual ways. But I have another question too about you're in the Twitch culture, and you see a gazillion other Twitch streams, and like, do you get any kind of influence or ideas from other quite different Twitch streams about what you should be doing visually or conceptually, or even business wise?
So one of the nice things about having a partner is that with complementary but different skill sets is that you can let them handle certain things that don't fit you well. I don't do well looking at other people's art because I compare myself, and then it creates a bit of a toxic inner dialogue. And so I try to really minimize how much I let that in. But Dandi looks at a ton of other streamers, and she filters a lot of that information for me, and she directs. She's I would say she has two veto votes versus my one veto vote when we're making big decisions. And so I look at it, the one thing about Twitch that we tried not to do is just assume the common aesthetic on Twitch, which is the sort of purple background gaming aesthetic. We tried to do something a little more influenced by our own sci-fi and cinematic sources. But it's hard not to compare yourself to other streams, especially if they're doing well and they have a ton of viewers and are making a lot of donations. So I have to filter out a lot of it, but Dandi thankfully is a really good partner in that sense. She will let that info in safely for my brain.
Scan the universe for you.
Yeah.
There's another question in the chat for you from Phileas from Luxembourg, and they're asking how the robot works. And I was curious about that too, actually. What exactly is that robot doing, and how does that work?
Well, here, maybe I'll do another quick screen share. So I have this Xbox controller. I don't know if my webcam's visible right now, but I've mapped its movement. Left stick is X and Z. Right stick is looking up, down, and turning left and right. And the right and left triggers are to float up and down. If I also have a voice changer, so that when I speak as him, there's a robotic voice. And then when I press start, he comes in and out of existence. So right now, because I've hijacked the mic, TouchDesigner doesn't hear it, but his eyes also light up and his eyebrows move when I talk. So that's all being done, via one of the geos. And I believe he lives somewhere down here. Let me just quickly dig him up. See, this is one of the, there we go, Fixer version 3. So there were 2 other fixers before this. So you can see this is the joystick info coming in, and I'm just there's the left stick, here's the right stick.
Mm-hmm.
and it's just all the chops are being fed to nulls, which then control his geo, which is just simple geo. There's the eyebrows that move up and down and the eyes that glow. So I'm not sure if that's what the person's asking, but
Yeah.
that's the gist of it. Is I can, because of the tracking of Dandi, I can go around her in 3D space.
Nice.
And there's also, you can probably hear the sound. The sound is being generated by controlling the volume based on the stick with a bit of lag. So when the stick is pressed, I turn up the volume of that audio sample.
But but there's a pitch change too.
Yeah, pitch change as well. So
are you playing the audio?
Speed, speed is being based on the left stick X, and the volume is also.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the
Nice.
Fixer the robot.
That's great. Yeah, great. I mean, these are like nice little lessons in TouchDesigner.
Yeah, I feel like there's so many small tricks and like talks files in this system. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot.
Huge resource.
Yeah.
How long have you been working on this actually?
So 2019, we launched on OBS and did it for a year, and then all of 2020. And then 2021, January is about a month after I started learning TouchDesigner, thanks to Patchy projects, and we launched. And so it's been a year and a half now that we've been in TouchDesigner. And so this whole network is that original file. It's just been so, like, I'm sure there's some, what's it called? Software rot. There's something in there, I'm sure, that's like funky just from being old.
Yeah.
But to be honest, I'm blown away by how few issues we have had in terms of crashing or glitches that are like dead ends with TouchDesigner. Like it's really just been smooth sailing. We have had to have very few redundancies.
Yeah, we were talking in the dry run about kind of styles of working, and like your TOE file, your single TOE file, which exists from the beginning, is kind of like a geological history of of everything you've done. So all your old versions are there and so on, but they don't really get in the way. They're there, but it's kind of cool that they're still around and there's a bit of history there, and sure, you can go back to it, some things to go back to and get horrified at what you see, and then whatever. But it's although versus some other users that will cut things to be super minimal at all times at the expense of losing history. But it's kind of cool. And you don't pull in lots of tox files live. Like everything seems to be in the one TOE file, right? For your projects. So it's not like you use components that are imported on start or imported.
I see what you mean. No, there it's all one place, because I'm already jumping around in there with the floating network pop-ups and stuff. So like having to use the taskbar to switch to other, if that's what you mean, to other instances to edit tox files.
Yeah, well, like when you start up, you're not loading in a bunch of tox files that have been made kind of compartmentalized as a system. Like especially when many people are working on one project, you would have external tox files that they all load as they need them on demand or on startup and stuff like that. So you don't do that.
No, it's a very flat project that way and narrow, but I know that has drawbacks as well. Like, because if you look at the top level of the network, like it's like a rat's nest, right? Everything's pointing to itself. Like there's a line between every single
that's
any
true.
two bases, there's a line between them.
Oh my
God. Yeah.
I'm amazed that
it's one of my favorite things about Touch is that and this is a thing that I used to say a lot more, is TouchDesigner was made by nice people. A lot of a lot of other apps that require coding, I feel like there's almost like a barrier to entry where you almost like a hazing where you're like, look, you better get it, otherwise you're not using this program. With Touch,
Yeah.
I feel like once you get the initial, tidbits, you can relax in there and play with it, and you see exactly what's happening very visually, which to me is very de-stressing.
Yeah.
So for someone who doesn't like looking at code very much, it's a really nice balance. I find it to be a very friendly app. Once you get the first few things, I feel like, and even in the forums, I get this, is that the team, because so many people from the derivative team are active in the forums, I find that there's a real welcoming and understanding tone. If you go to an Adobe forum, it's like a wall, and it's very cold, and you're like, hey, I'm going to throw this info in there and it'll probably go nowhere.
Yeah.
But with the derivative forums, it's very, you feel like you are being heard, and you feel like the person wants to help you do it the way you want to do it. Because I think from the outset, Touch was developed to be helpful to artists, not to programmers.
Even though
that's a really huge difference.
Even though TouchDesigner is C++ and object oriented on the inside and very rigorous, for the artists, for the user, you can get at anything anywhere with just a reference. You don't have to expose it by stuff on object object oriented style.
Right.
So it's kind of like you can wire things. So you're at your own mercy if you wire things all over the place, and it's kind of like spaghetti, but you can do it. And you don't need to be super rigorous. And I deliberately made it that way so that it's an open tool. So it's kind of cool. And the other thing too is the derivative team is, I mean, we're learning from you guys because you guys are in the field making stuff with it. So you're exploring new devices, you're coming up with new techniques and running into things that we didn't think of. So we got to be listening to you guys, because that's where all the kind of like when the pedal hits the metal happens.
Exactly.
So
Matija, there is another question in the chat for you from Tiwonku, who wants to know if there is any other external Python scripts you're using, or if it's all encapsulated into the tool.
No, I'm not using anything external. I mean, I import stuff, but that's all common stuff. I mean, if I use too many obfuscated things or things that I didn't build, coming back to that to do anything to change it is very painful for me. So
yeah, I feel that.
I use as few scripts as possible, and I use as few channels per chop as possible. 99.9% of my chops are single channel, single sample. Because I'm really just making it plain. I really like, if I have to interpret anything or go into a base to work on something, that extra step slows me down a lot. So everything's flat and simple.
As possible. Interesting. Yeah. So
quite different for me. Yes, it's deeply nested. Yeah. But if you do have a problem navigating your network, if there's a lot of nesting, actually the bookmark system is super helpful for that. I'm using that a lot, actually. Yeah, with the star at the top.
The tab. Very few people use those tabs.
Bookmarks
at the top.
And it's so good, actually. It works so well for me.
Yeah, you have your 10 favorite places to live, and then you go bang, bang, bang between them.
Yeah, exactly. That's
interesting.
And then you can have a lot of like deeply nested stuff, because I'm nesting everything with the UI, so you have to go like into comms and the containers. So it really helps with that.
Yeah. Do you, Matija, do you use extensions at all?
There's one extension in my project from when I made an extension to learn how they work, and that's the only one. Because to me it's the same thing about, like, it's ever so slightly more obfuscated that way, but that might just be a personal mental barrier that's not true.
Well, touch users are all over the place. Some people use absolutely zero, don't even use a DAT. Some people are super like Python oriented and use extensions to the hilt. And
Like Alpha Moon base.
Well, yes, like Alpha Moon based, and like Ivan, our Python person at Derivative, he's really rigorous on that too. And there's good reason for good structured development on that front, especially for large projects. And my style is to use Python where necessary. I use extensions about average amount of times for a TouchDesigner person, mostly when dealing with things where you have to react to an event and change some nodes. So in a script and extension, you call something from a script or from an device event or something, and you need to have something structured in extensions to kind of deal with things in a more streamlined way. But I use internal parameters a lot to substitute for properties of extensions. So that's a kind of a idiosyncrasy too.
Here's a very common thing that I do is I expose stuff so much that I keep functions separate in different DATs. So like this, that here,
I started doing that too.
DATs.
Yeah.
And it's just so
interesting.
When coming back to a file,
Mm-hmm.
like if I didn't go into this base for 2 months and came back to this, it would take me extremely little time to understand how these work.
Yeah, right. So those three would go into an extension as three functions, and it would be different. But it's interesting. Cool. I mean, where do you keep your data, state data of things? Like you can put them in chop channels or DAT cells or parameters or where?
State stuff is almost always a chop, sometimes a DAT, but like I call them seeds. Like usually it's a 1 or a 0, and then it lives in a chop, a single channel, single sample chop.
Yeah. Okay.
99% of the time.
Yeah, I've migrated to using internal parameters for that because of the advantage of keeping it as a parameter. But everybody does it quite.
Just still like circling back to Isabel's question, when we had people helping us with my bounty board, they delivered the most beautiful toxes with custom parameters and like a README, and like everything was very clean. And I look at it and I was like, oh, I get how to use this. It's so beautiful, and I use it. And then the moment I have to tweak it and edit how one thing works, and I then have to learn their network anyway, so it slows me down. So I would actually prefer to get the least cleaned up network. I want the flattest network where each function is in its own DAT, and then the brain pain goes to 0. But you know, I'm sure once I start working with someone more full time, that'll happen.
Yeah, but your style is the style that matches your mind, so I don't have any judgment one way or the other on it.